I was sitting in the waiting area outside my boss's office, straightening my collar like it was a promotion interview, because that's exactly what I thought it was. For months he'd been hinting at it, dropping comments in meetings, "You're the backbone of this place," or "No one handles field compliance like you." After 21 years on the job, I figured my time had finally come. I wasn't flashy, I wasn't political, but I was damn good at what I did. So when I was called in for a development meeting, I had every reason to believe this was the moment. I'd already been told the position would open soon, Assistant Director of Field Compliance. It was mine, unofficially. That's what everyone said, even my boss, for months. Instead, he slid a folder across the desk like he was handing off a coffee order. "We've reviewed all the candidates and ultimately found someone who better aligns with the department's evolving goals." I looked at the document. My name was there, but under the heading, Recommendation, Not Selected. The reason? Traditional mindset. Lacks dynamic leadership traits. Traditional. I kept my face still, but something cracked inside. Then he added, like tossing salt into the wound, "We've already selected the new candidate. You'll be mentoring him during the transition. We'd really appreciate you helping him get up to speed," he added. "Your experience makes you the ideal mentor for this phase." It felt like someone had quietly rewritten the last 20 years of my life and left me with a supporting role in someone else's story. That evening, I came home later than usual. My wife asked how the meeting went. I lied, told her it had been postponed. I didn't want to see the look in her eyes. Pity or disappointment, I couldn't decide which would be worse. Later that night, I found her in the kitchen, watching something on her laptop with headphones in, smiling faintly. When she noticed me, she shut it quickly, instinctively. I didn't think much of it at the time, just a small thing. But later, I'd remember it differently. The next morning at work, the office was already buzzing. People were murmuring about the new guy, the one they'd picked instead of me. I hadn't even been told who it was. I was preparing a site inspection report when the director appeared beside me. "This is our new hire," he said. "He'll be shadowing you for the next few weeks. I told him there's no better person to learn from." I turned and froze. It was him. My wife's nephew. He stepped forward and extended his hand. "Boss said you'd show me how everything really works," he said, smiling. I couldn't respond. I just stared. And in that moment, something shifted. This wasn't just disappointment anymore. This was betrayal. This wasn't just office politics. This was personal. How do you respond when betrayal walks through the front door and shakes your hand? I didn't sleep that week. Not because of the demotion. I could survive that. What I couldn't shake was the precision of it all, the timing, the way my boss delivered the decision like it was out of his hands, and the way that kid, my wife's nephew, walked into the role like it had been waiting for him, because maybe it had. He was already too familiar with the systems, knew names he shouldn't have, referenced policies from our department that aren't public. He'd sit across from me during training sessions and scroll through his phone while I explained protocols I knew he hadn't read, because I had written half of them myself. He'd nod, smirk, say, "Got it," and then ask the same question the next morning. He wasn't here to learn. He was here to replace. And everyone was treating it like normal. I started noticing other things I'd always filtered out. My boss now avoided one-on-one conversations with me. Any feedback he gave was in vague platitudes, CCing other department heads. And when the mentorship tracker platform was updated, my entries were somehow always delayed or removed entirely, as if I wasn't mentoring at all. That's when I reached out to Mia. She was a junior HR compliance officer, sharp-eyed and underused. I'd helped her navigate a difficult departmental audit the year before. She owed me, and she hadn't forgotten. We met in a nearby coffee shop under the pretense of reviewing old inspection archives. "Something's not adding up," I told her. "Can you pull his application packet?" Discreetly. She hesitated. "That's internal access only. But if something's flagged for potential conflict of interest, I can open a review file." I gave her the timeline, the documents I'd seen, and the inconsistencies I couldn't explain. I didn't have to say the name. She understood. The next day, she sent me a secure message. His application was uploaded 2 weeks before the job was even listed. Referral line says, "Internal recommendation, director level." There's also a digital signature from a non-HR account. That shouldn't happen. Meanwhile, at home, things were quieter than ever, but not in a peaceful way. My wife's smile had become mechanical. Her phone was never out of reach. Her evening online meetings became routine, always on the nights I stayed at the office to avoid awkward dinners. One night, I opened the old cloud account we'd stopped using after a storage limit change. It was still linked to our smart speaker app, the one that auto-records snippets when commands were misheard. There were 4 flagged clips. 2 were ambient, music requests. 1 was my own voice, distorted by background noise. And the 4th, time-stamped 2 weeks before my mentorship began, was quiet at first. Then, "He'll do whatever you tell him," a man's voice said. "He still thinks he's next in line." And her voice, unmistakable, cool. "That's why it'll work. Just make sure my nephew gets the position." My hand was trembling, not from rage, but from clarity. Everything locked into place with clinical precision. The performance review, the delay, the selection, the rehearsed smile from the man who took my chair and shook my hand. It hadn't been incompetence. It had been choreography. I met Mia again. This time I showed her the clip, sound only, no names. She looked pale when it ended. That's grounds for a formal complaint, and possibly an ethics investigation, depending on how far this goes. "It goes far," I said. The next day, she flagged a personnel note added under my boss's HR file, created by someone from his own executive account. A note about merit-based recruitment exceptions, backdated. They were covering tracks. That night, my wife's laptop was open on the dining table. She was in the shower. The screen dimmed, not locked. A folder was open. Family budgeting. Except it wasn't spreadsheets. It was a PDF. A draft letter of recommendation. From my boss. For her nephew. And in the forwarded email chain beneath it, "Just reword this slightly so it doesn't look like it's coming from you. Use my letterhead. You know what to do." Her email. To him. My wife. To my boss. I closed the laptop without a sound. Sat down on the opposite chair. My reflection in the black glass of the screen looked unfamiliar. That was the moment. I wasn't angry. I wasn't devastated. I was done pretending this was salvageable. What would you do when faced with irrefutable proof of betrayal that demands an immediate response? City Hall was hosting its quarterly Employee Appreciation Reception, the kind with dry cheese trays, over-rehearsed speeches, and enough handshakes to make your skin itch. Normally, I would have skipped it, but this time I made sure to be there, early, not to be seen, but to watch. They'd set up everything in the atrium. Glass walls, full AV equipment, standing room for 200. Department heads lined up near the podium, chatting with staff, putting on their polished public faces. I stood at the back, arms folded, scanning the room. My boss walked in wearing that same synthetic smile he always wore for the cameras. I didn't move. The lights dimmed. The director took the stage. "We're here to recognize outstanding employees who keep our city safe, our infrastructure strong, and our future bright." Lies never sounded smoother. As he spoke, phones around the room began buzzing, one by one. At first quietly, then urgently. Heads turned,
Hands reached into pockets. Some people whispered. Others stared blankly at their screens. The mass email had landed. Subject line: "To whom it may concern, my husband is sleeping with the wife of his colleague." Sent from the personal address of the director's wife. To every employee in the city administration. CC'd to local media, city council, and the ethics board. The email body? Dates, photos, screenshots, policy violations, and one very specific claim. My husband gave a job and a promotion to his mistress's nephew at her personal request, in violation of every hiring guideline your office is supposed to uphold. You could feel the temperature shift. The director's voice faltered mid-sentence. The microphone squeaked as he instinctively stepped back. People were staring at him, then at me. He looked at me across the room, just for a second, and I didn't blink. He stepped off the stage. No explanation, no speech. I stayed where I was, silent. A few minutes later, I walked outside. No one stopped me. I didn't need to say a word. When I got home, the lights were off. Her shoes were gone from the rack. So was the coat she always wore to family dinners. On the kitchen counter, a single note, folded in half. "It's over between us. I'm leaving. Movers will come for the rest." No signature, no explanation. Just silence, finally, and fully hers. Later that night, I got a call. Unknown number. It was his wife. "You're not the only one they played," she said, her voice sharp but steady. "I saw the messages weeks ago. I waited until today for a reason." "Why?" I asked. "Because the board meets tomorrow, and now they have no way to bury it." She hung up. And for the first time in months, I slept. But the next morning, something changed. Mia forwarded me a personnel alert. Suspension pending investigation. It wasn't for him. It was for me. Anonymous claims had been submitted, alleging that I created a hostile mentorship environment and manipulated internal access to retaliate against leadership. The language was sterile, but the message was clear. They were fighting back. How do you proceed when the truth is revealed, but the battle is far from over?
I'd memorized every word. "It's over between us. I'm leaving. Movers will come for the rest." No apology, no explanation, not even a signature. The thing about betrayal is, it doesn't scream, it whispers. Quietly rearranges your reality until you realize you've been standing in an empty house for years. For 2 decades, I'd believed in loyalty, structure, show up, work hard, earn your place. But she'd rewritten all that in one sentence. And my boss rewrote the rest in a single email. I wasn't angry. I was done being shocked. What I felt now was precision, cold, sharpened resolve. The next morning, I didn't go to the office. Mia had arranged for us to meet quietly in a neutral space, not City Hall, a rented meeting room above a local insurance firm. She was already waiting when I arrived, a plain folder and a locked tablet on the table in front of her. "You weren't imagining any of it," she said before I sat down. "The hiring process violated 5 separate policies. You were flagged for termination after the mentorship began, not before." I exhaled slowly. "So they were never planning to keep me." She nodded. "They couldn't. You knew too much." Then she slid the folder toward me. Inside, copies of internal emails, mismatched timestamps, duplicated file paths, all suggesting falsified hiring records. 2 evaluation reports submitted under my name, neither of which I'd written. I looked up. My voice was even. "Can we escalate this?" "If you sign a formal conflict report and I attach this," she tapped the tablet, "then yes, it goes to the Ethics Commission and triggers legal review." "And what happens to you?" "Doesn't matter," she said. "What matters is they don't get to bury you." I stared at the pen for a moment. Signing wasn't just about revenge. It was about legacy, dignity.
making it clear I hadn't gone down quietly. I had been targeted, replaced, and I was done pretending otherwise. I signed. I didn't go back to our house that night. I booked a small apartment on the other side of town, a converted walk-up above a closed bakery. It smelled faintly of cinnamon and new paint. The landlord didn't ask questions. I didn't offer answers. I called a lawyer I trusted, someone my father once worked with during a municipal hazard dispute. She remembered my name. She remembered my father. "You kept your work clean," she said. "Let's keep your exit cleaner." We discussed early retirement terms, digital evidence protections, liability shielding, all in the span of 45 focused minutes. I signed 2 more documents, one to secure my pension, one to restrict retroactive character reviews without legal representation. I wasn't planning to vanish. I was planning to leave in a way they couldn't erase. But just as I stepped out of her office, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. No words, just a single image. It was my resignation draft, the one I hadn't submitted yet. It had been leaked, publicly, along with a falsified timestamp. The headline on the image read, "Disgruntled employee accuses supervisor after poor performance review." Below it, anonymous internal statements attached to my name. Claims I'd misused access, intimidated colleagues, and manipulated junior staff. The war wasn't over. They'd just changed the battlefield. When your plan is in motion, but the stakes suddenly rise, how far are you willing to go?
The public leak backfired. Within hours, Mia forwarded me a screenshot. The ethics board had frozen all internal proceedings related to my file. The reason? Retaliatory manipulation of HR records. Anonymously leaking my resignation draft, which was stored only in my private folder, raised red flags that couldn't be ignored. Whoever sent it had inadvertently exposed their own access. The investigation deepened, quietly, thoroughly. 2 weeks later, the director resigned for personal reasons. The official statement didn't mention misconduct, but the board's internal memo did, and it leaked just the way the city likes its secrets, anonymously but unmistakably. The phrases abuse of authority, conflict of interest, and integrity breach were repeated like headlines. The nephew's contract was reviewed next. He had submitted an academic certificate from a program he never completed. Termination followed without appeal. He was gone in a day. As for me, I signed the retirement papers on my terms, with full pension, no restrictions, and a sealed notation in my record. Departed with honor. Internal misconduct not attributable. They wanted to bury me. Instead, I walked out clean, with my name intact. But walking away isn't the same as healing, and justice, even when served, doesn't close every wound. The apartment above the bakery became more than a hiding place. It became mine. I repainted the walls myself, deep gray, warm white. Stripped it of every leftover screw or nail the last tenant left behind. It was the first space in years where I didn't have to carry anyone else's weight. A month later, I did something no one expected. I filed for incorporation. Public Safety Works, a nonprofit I'd quietly dreamed about but never dared start. Now it existed. Designed to train local inspectors, audit neglected infrastructure, and track safety violations citywide. Not from inside a bureaucracy, from outside where sunlight reached. To my surprise, the city endorsed it, softly at first, then officially. The department that once discarded me now cited my program in public briefings. A few former colleagues reached out. One even joined the board. They hadn't forgotten me. They'd just needed someone else to remind them who I was. A few days after the director stepped down, I got another call. It was his ex-wife. Her tone was colder this time, less angry, more resolved. "If you're still curious," she said,
You should know it was your wife's nephew who found out about the affair first. He caught them, and he used it. I didn't say a word. He blackmailed her, she continued, told her he'd expose everything unless she convinced my husband, your boss, to give him the job. That's how it all started. She didn't push him forward out of love. She did it out of fear. Then she hung up. And somehow that made it easier. Not better, but clearer. The divorce finalized quickly. I kept the house, but I let it go. Sold it to a retired couple who said the kitchen felt peaceful. That was enough for me. There was no battle over property, no dramatic courtroom scenes, just 2 signatures and a silence that finally meant closure. I protected my assets, moved what mattered, and let the rest fall away. Some days I still think about the email. Not the betrayal, the delivery. One woman, burned and quiet, dropped a digital match into the system that had enabled her husband. She didn't shout. She just pressed send. That's what real power looks like. Not noise, but precision. I learned something in all this. Dignity doesn't mean staying silent. It means knowing when to speak and what your silence costs the people who betrayed you. They expected me to rage, to fall apart, to self-destruct. Instead, I outlasted them. Not because I had a perfect plan, but because I knew one truth better than they did. You don't need to scream to be heard. You just need to be right and patient. I wasn't out for revenge. I was clearing out the rot. And for the first time in 20 years, I wasn't standing in the shadows anymore. How would you handle a betrayal that threatened both your career and your identity? Share your own story or thoughts in the comments below.